Chrissy Naranci, I'm sure some of you know, she's from Manchester Metropolitan University and is very dynamic in this digital space. And she's been running Creative HE. Typically it happens as a 1-week online open course. She originally ran it in P2PU. Have you heard of that? The person-to-person university. It seems to be a free cash, a free space where you can deliver courses and cash resources. It's not very nimble, but you might want to have a look at it. P2PU. So she
Thanks for that.
yeah, she moved the course into Google Plus. So if you look at that link there, that's the Google Plus community. And now every time we have an iteration of the course, it just runs in there. That's like, I'm sure you know, Google Plus is like Facebook for grown-ups. You can put little things down the side, and it's a friendly dialogic space. What some people say is it's a bit scary because its history stays there. So if you're new to online courses, it can feel like you have to take quite a big leap into this thing that's already populated. But if you think about the pluses and minuses of that, maybe you say, well, that is a good thing. People have to take these leaps. This is a friendly space to leap into. So with our course, each time we have an iteration, Chrissy and I will have an online chat about what the topic of the 5 different days would be, what particular illustration we would use to illustrate it, what reading, open source reading we might suggest, and if there are any little videos to seed the discussion. And then it just launches and we facilitate the course. The course happens through the discussion between and among the participants day by day. That's basically it. There you go.
That sounds great. No, that does sound great. So how many times does this course run then? Is it so am I right in thinking it's a 1 week long? Is it advertised almost like an event? So it's being promoted as this is the week that things are going to happen?
Yes, that's a very good question. Last year it was linked up with Professor Norman Jackson and the Year of Creative Pedagogies in HE. So Chrissy and I co-facilitated it twice. We had a guest one in Lisa Clune, did one on creative pedagogy and the body and embodied teaching and learning, and Norman Jackson delivered one. So it can be a bit of a movable feast. This year we're definitely planning on one. It's starting week beginning the 22nd of January. You're all welcome to join in. And what Chrissy does, this was the bit I forgot to mention, what Chrissy does is she has tied it into her PG cert at Manchester Metropolitan University. So she has a face-to-face meeting before it runs with people, and they work out how they're going to keep a portfolio, what sort of portfolio evidence they will collect over the course of the semester. So although the course is delivered in a week, they have, I think, a semester to prepare their portfolios. Here at London Met, sorry, go on.
So I was just going to say that's a really good model in terms of the blended approach as well, isn't it? To start to one thing I think we were discussing in previous forums is that high idea of trying to build the community together, and actually having that starting session in a face-to-face environment seems to be a good way of getting the community going. I don't know what was that the intention?
I think so. I mean, I'm having more trouble here at London Met because we already have a PG cert and people aren't sort of being flexible. I want to drag this into it because we have a module called the negotiated study module, and I see that this would work really well with that. If someone was feeling that they maybe wanted to embrace the digital a little bit more or creative pedagogy a bit more, this online course would fit and they could bring it together. But what I'm trying to do now at London Met is we've developed an online CPD course in digital teaching and learning, and I'm trying to get this course recognised as support for those participants. There you go. That might be a bit messy, but that's it.
Yes, I like the idea of tying it into a PG cert, because then you've got accreditation for that as well, haven't you? There's a little bit of incentive in terms of engaging with the online space, because it leads towards a formal PG cert. But it also seems to act as an informal space as well. Do you find that you get engagement after the period of support? Does the space, is it just one space that is continually added to year upon year, or instance upon instance of the run?
You do find that as you suggest, there are people that continue using it, continue sharing creative ideas in there, and people who've joined in one run will join in again in another run, because it'll have a completely different character, and they'll get different things, or be able to offer different things to it. So it's like it's started up an ongoing community of practice, community of inquiry, that then bursts into life, a bit like mushrooms.
I've never compared an academic to a mushroom before, but there's a first time for everything, isn't there? I would say that's a really creative use of the Google Plus space. And there's quite a few people on there. There's over 600 people on that space, aren't there? Has that been helped by having Google apps as an embedded part of the organisation, or do essentially what I'm asking here is, do people already have Google accounts that they can draw upon, or do you have to get them set up as well?
And it was really difficult getting Google apps agreed onto people's PCs, and then it suddenly became more normal. So yes, you're right. That's something to think about.
I mean, Neil's made a good point in the chat there about the engagement with online elements has been low, and I remember that from when I used to work in HE, where we had an awful lot of material, and we actually combined that into what was then called the York Technology Enhanced Learning Handbook. But then the problem is still, how do you get people to get there in the first place, and how do you get people to engage with the resources? That's one challenge. And the second challenge is, how do you get people to actually engage with the social learning aspect of it as well? And I think the blended approach seems to be good, and incorporating it with the PG cert, that seems like a worthwhile approach. Are there any other comments from anyone else on the chat? I mean, I like the idea that you really got people sharing a lot, and you've brought in other experts. I know Christina Ranci's in there, but also Simon Ray. These are the names that I've found quite familiar on the LTHE chat on Twitter. So there's some nice overlap there.
I can see the comments that it's difficult to navigate around with the G+ layout. I think that's exactly right. I mean, especially there may be some of us who are quite good or feel comfortable with technology because it's a little bit linear and anal, if you know what I mean. So something that's a bit of an explosion like Google+, it is difficult. I absolutely agree. And I think all the time we have to work on ourselves and give ourselves permission to be a bit messy and to get a bit lost. And I think that's the problem with these spaces, I think.
They can be a bit messy. Thanks for that. Do you mind if unless anyone's got anything else to say, I'm just going to share a few ideas from what we're doing here at STEM Learning on FutureLearn. I'll just load up my examples again. So one of the, I just wanted to sort of give an overview of what things have informed my way of doing online learning. One of the standout approaches for me from when I first started being involved with distance learning was the Anderson-Garrison model. I don't know if anyone's seen that before, but what I really find interesting is this way that you can think about the interactions between teachers, and in this case this would be instructors on the course, and students. It could be academics on a PG cert. I'm not talking the students of the course, as opposed to students as a group, and the content of the course. How deep and meaningful learning is actually defined. They having a look at Anderson's description, this is a quote from him: deep and meaningful formal learning is supported as long as one of the three forms of interaction, student to teacher, student to student, student to content, is at a high level. The other two may be offered at minimal levels or even eliminated without degrading the educational experience. So essentially, you're not supposed to do everything, but you just focus on one or two. And high levels of more than one of these three modes will likely provide a more satisfying educational experience, though these experiences may not be at cost or time effective as less interactive learning sequences. So essentially, just having lots of content isn't going to win. You need that interaction. I think what you've provided there, Sandra, from the Google Plus community as well is not just provision of content, but actually getting your participants to interact with that content by sharing it and talking about it, and having the guest speakers and the role of the facilitator in there as well. Actually, it'd be interesting, Sandra, if I could just ask how you would define the role of the facilitator in that space.
I don't think there's complete agreement on the role of the facilitator. I think I like to be quite a light touch one and sort of try and nudge the students to engage with each other, a bit more student to student. But I think some people feel as facilitators that if there isn't some sort of facilitator touch on every single comment, then we've been not doing our job properly. I think they're two perfectly valid positions, but they are slightly different.
And why would you go down down the light touch route mainly to get your participants to make contributions, and presumably you're, instead of telling them things, you're asking them questions.
Also, I'm a bit worried. I think if the facilitator has to touch everything, it's almost like we are then the validating touch. So if we're sometimes not there, and that's okay. That is a more ethical way of doing it, I think.
I think when we're thinking this in the context of CPD, I mean, I'm just thinking here of Lucy up in Edinburgh with your law CPD. What's the role of your facilitators in that course? Because for us, we're trying to adopt the questioning approach rather than the ticking yes, you've got the right answer approach. Mainly for us, because on FutureLearn we're dealing with hundreds of comments, but also hundreds of different contexts as well. People coming from different teaching backgrounds, and we don't know all the detail that you might have on a smaller cohort where you can get to learn about the learners and where their backgrounds are. On FutureLearn, when we're dealing with a lot of people, we don't have that prior knowledge of the learners, so we have to be very careful about saying yes, that's the right thing for your context, and instead we have to adopt that questioning approach instead. So Lucy says that most of the student-tutor interactions via discussion, so again the tutor tends to be questioning and developing learning through discussion, and I think that's again one of the first forums we looked at a difference between online CPD as courses and online training, and I think that is one of the key differences really with online CPD and online courses. You are trying to develop that learning through discussion, as you said there, Lucy. And Neil makes a very good point as well about general learning, teaching support, learning technology support. If you help people think about solving their own problems instead of solving it for them, then it forces them to actually think. And it's about, for me, certainly in the courses that we design, we give them some content, but it's through interpreting that content in their own context, talking to other students about it, and then perhaps even asking the tutor or getting the tutor to ask questions to help them rationalise it in their own context. That is where the learning takes place. The learning doesn't take place by just absorbing new information. But we did have quite an extensive discussion on why e-training was bad, and I think we came to that conclusion as well. So there were a couple of things I wanted to show you, just to see if you've adopted similar approaches yourself. This particular slide here is an extract of a pre-course survey that we have embedded in all of our FutureLearn courses, which the learners are supposed to complete the survey, at the very beginning of the course, and then they repeat the survey at the very end. And as part of a reflective activity, they compare what they did what they responded at the start to what they responded at the end, and that helps both them identify their progress on the course, but also gives us an idea of the impact of the course and whether it's actually changed their practice. Now, the way that we phrase these questions, we've got an expert here in doing research and surveys, Irina Kudenko, and she's helped us advised on how we could best phrase these sorts of questions. And I wanted to share that nugget with you because I think it's quite useful. And basically, she said, don't do these sorts of questions based on what someone understands or what someone knows. Base them on what they actually do. So we have rephrased some of these questions previously from saying, I understand how this particular curriculum works, to I teach the curriculum in this particular way. Obviously, that's a light touch example there, but it's a very subtle difference. But I think that really comes to the core of how we would address impact here when we're doing CPD with teachers. So we have specific examples related to the course, and we have more general practice as well. But I thought I'd just share that with you just because I think it's quite a nice tool to start off a CPD experience and also provide some scope for reflection. Do any of you use something similar to this in your own courses? Well, it's nice to see you missing a trick. We could provide you a trick. Like I say, it does provide some really useful data, and it does give us an idea of where the course is working or where it's not working, where perhaps people are coming to the course with behaviours that or teaching practice that actually we want them to have, and they're already come to the course with those. So perhaps we don't need to spend too much time either focusing on that part of the course, or even better, where we have people who don't have those skills drawing upon the expertise of the group. So, for example, the very top line here, a large proportion of people say that they're very careful about how they speak to students. Well, what we could do is actually designing an activity in to get the people who are comfortable with speaking to students to explain how they go about doing it and what approaches they take. So we can start drawing upon the wisdom of our group as opposed to trying to provide the content from an expert perspective here as well. One of the other things we do in this survey is actually make it very clear that we're asking our learners to identify what they want to improve as a result of the course. So they're not going to come to the course hoping that something will stick. They've actually got a target in mind, almost something they want to develop, and that's again quite important for us to think to instill that approach in our participants, so that they are conscious of their own development and they reflect upon that during the course. But our tasks on FutureLearn, I don't know if you've been on FutureLearn, but it's quite a very simple layout. It's structured into weeks, but you can join at any point in time when the course is open, and you just start the course when you join. So you don't. It's a bit strange actually, because it's different from a normal course where you have a very clear start date, and that's the point where facilitation takes place. It is possible to join a FutureLearn course on the last day it's running, but still have access to complete the course for the course duration, which makes it difficult for us to facilitate, which is why we have to structure activities that can be done independently of the tutor and also independently of the social learning aspect as well. And this is just one of the examples of a task that we've used on a brand new course. We haven't trialed this yet. So this is I'll be able to report back on whether the learners find this useful or not, but actually to start grounding what they've taken from the course and actually talking with colleagues in their own face-to-face environment. So although we're talking about online CPD, we are very conscious that people are working within face-to-face and non-online contexts. Through this type of task, we're just trying to get them to take what they're learning online back into their real world. That's not the right word, but face-to-face environments, offline environments. Again, I think one of the most valuable things about CPD is the idea of discussion and talking to colleagues, people you've never met before, like you. It's great to have a chat, but also with their own colleagues as well, and sharing their own understanding. So we're going to try this out and see how it works. I'll be able to report back to this as well. Yeah, Neil, I've seen that course on accessibility from, is it from Southampton who are running that one? They are, that's a great example of a course there, and the interface is so simple. I mean, sometimes it's frustratingly simple because every single page has at the bottom of it a comments field. So even if you're not expecting learners to comment, there's a comments field there, and you're essentially having to monitor it just to make sure people are on track. So I have this approach where we make it really clear with our instructions that it's going to be a task. We put the little line down the side, but essentially make it clear that this is the point where we want you to do something. This is the point where we want you to respond and share on the discussions. Have you found anything interesting in that course, Neil? Have there been any particular approaches that that jump out to you as being valuable? Yeah. So the fact that there's a lot of comments there to look through, I suppose, and to learn from. Does that make it? I wonder if that's because we're thinking about this idea of how we build these communities online, and having all those contributions. And Sandra, you said yourself that having the Google Plus community there with lots of postings on to begin with acts as, well, it's interesting if it acts as a motivator to say, well, look, other people have done it, so why don't you? As well as perhaps being a little bit intimidating. But that's really interesting, though, that you've not got lost in the conversation. That's one thing I always worry about with our courses, where there is too much there for people to get a handle on. The way I tend to focus on MOOCs when I'm doing courses on FutureLearn, it's just to focus on the page, as you said there, just to focus on not trying to cover everything. I think it's impossible to do that, but just to focus on each page in its own right. It's quite nice as well on FutureLearn. You can have likes and people replying to you, and you get notifications about that. It's a little bit of a Facebook type interface on there. One of the other things we use is very similar actually to the Google Plus type of layout. One of the activities we have in our Managing Behaviour for Learning course is teachers are asked to provide examples of their rules posters, or come up with 3 rules that they use in their classroom. And what I found really interesting is the way that we had a huge range of contexts here. So even you might guess that the B Padlet post was from a primary class, but down the bottom here there's an example from a teacher who's teaching 20 to 21 year olds. So even though the course is for both primary and secondary, we do have this big mix of context and experience that's shared, and people learn from each other. And when I've asked people before, should we be splitting up, or should we have a Padlet wall for primary, Padlet wall for secondary? Actually, people said no, because they like to see what's happening in the different fields and the different stages of education. And I think that's actually quite a valuable point for my learning anyway, when putting these courses together, that there's a lot of value in learning from context that you're not familiar with, which is why I like FutureLearn. I don't know if, Neil, you've got the same view, where you do have lots of different ideas from different perspectives coming in, and you do just cherry pick the ones that are going to work for you. Not everything is going to be right, and I think that's one of the great advantages of such a big community. Yeah, those nuggets. The nuggets are going to be polished up and offer something new. It's just finding them that's the tricky bit, I suppose. And with I think this is where it differs between perhaps if you're doing an institutional CPD, in that the institutional context is sometimes, this again from my experience in HE, the institutional context is sometimes so important because that's how you get people interested. But at the same time, you need to find ways to bring in examples from outside the institution, or outside a context that people are familiar with. But you almost need to start with the familiar and then bring in the unfamiliar. That's my take on it. I'm not sure if that's true for everyone. I mean, Sandra, in your CPD, and actually for Lucy in your law CPD, do you start with the familiar and then move into the unfamiliar examples?
Sorry, I'm just going to speak because it's easier than typing. I tend to like destabilising people right from the start, because our first module that we teach is facilitating student learning. That's in my PG cert, right, not the online courses. And I just like to just firstly throw it all up in the air and get people doing something completely different. So I get them, instead of telling them anything, I get even the staff on the PG cert into groups, and they must come up with the questions to ask us about the module. Then they've got to do collages of themselves and their pedagogic approach, and then we get them role-playing a nuclear bunker thing, so that by the end of the first lesson, everything's been thrown up in the air, but hopefully they've had a good time. So it's sort of, yeah, it's trying to break the rules just...
No, that sounds really interesting. So how do your participants react to that? Do you get a little bit of friction to begin with, or are they up for it from the start?
Yes, sometimes a bit of friction. What you hope is that the majority will quite enjoy it or be intrigued, and then the grumpy ones are dragged along. I haven't had the weight the other way yet. Are we starting again tomorrow? I'll let you know.
Brilliant. I've just noticed that Lucy and Neil are also typing there, so I'll just wait to see what they've got to contribute. Yeah, I think, Neil, you make a good point on the MOOCs. There are a lot of comments where people go, yes, I agree. But the people that I think it's, again, those asking questions, isn't it, and offering that different perspective, that really they're the valuable people in the discussions. So Lucy says our course generally attracts medical practitioners. There's usually a range of different roles and experiences. So start with intro and then build up from there. I suppose that's quite interesting actually as well, because you're trying to build a foundation from which you can develop further. And so if you do have a mixture of people, I mean, that's what we do on the MOOCs. We have the articles, the pages of short, 300 words, or it could be a video of 2 minutes, that provide the foundation. And then the comments or the discussion underneath allows the learning to go a bit further into those individual contexts. Neil says there that one of the problems with how many the conversations go on future is that the comments have tended to feel like people making a statement. Yeah, so it makes them think about the subject matter, but not a conversation. You're not the only person to say that. We've had this discussion here at STEM Learning about how much interaction takes place. Whilst we've got a few people that are really keen and really will take the conversation on, that isn't representative of the majority. And I don't know about the accessibility course. One of the things we're trying to do is to be clearer about in the instructions. So actually put in the instructions, find another post that either you disagree with or agree with, or is the same context or a different context, and explain why you can or can't use that approach in your own environment. Lucy, you've shared a resource there. I'm going to have a quick look at that, and that should give me some extra ideas. Thanks for that. That's really good. I'm looking forward to reading that later on. Yeah, I think you might be right there, Neil, about saying that it's not part of a group, so not doing the same thing at the same time. You don't have that same community bond, shall we say, that you might do through something like Sandra's course, where you've got a cohort that starts off together, and it being self-paced. Yeah, that's a very valid point. Here's another thing I wanted to share with you. Something we've done quite regularly now are these Q&A sessions. So we don't do live webinars with our online CPD group, mainly because essentially we don't know the right time to do it. We've tried them in the past, and we found that the take up has been minimal. Sort of the number of people you can count on one hand. To try, even if you've got a MOOC of 10,000, you're not going to get 100 or even 50 people in the same place at the same time on a webinar. And instead of scheduling a particular time, what we've done is we still want the opportunity for our learners to directly address our educators with questions, particularly the complex questions that can't be addressed quickly through lots of text comments. So we do a Q&A process where learners will submit questions 2 days before, and they will use the like feature to indicate which questions they would want answered from their peers. They obviously reply to each other, as I've got the example on here. The one on the left there is quite a detailed example from a particular context. And the one on the right, we didn't pick up in the Q&A, but other participants have responded instead. But then we take those questions, the quite detailed context examples, unpick them in a discussion where we have normally one or two, well, ideally two people really, to talk through that particular question. It doesn't necessarily come out with one right answer, but it's a way of showing an expert's perspective and how they would approach that challenge that the learner has raised. And they've been quite popular, and it makes it quite an authentic experience as well. It feels like you are actually engaging with real people behind the scenes, because, like, I don't know how you feel about this, Neil, but sometimes on FutureLearn you wonder whether there is actually an educator there at the same time you are, and whether they are just they've produced the course and left it to run on its own. Some of the courses are like that for sure, but what we try and do here is actually give our learners the opportunity to still engage with educators at particular points, and it's not that ongoing support all the time. It is put in at particular points where we can take advantage of that interaction. So we've had some quite positive feedback from that. Is there anything anyone would like to ask about that approach or anything I've shown so far? Yeah, it's the name, isn't it? And the person you see in the video, and when they actually acknowledge your contributions, it is a great motivator. I might let me just see if I can find a link to. I don't think I've uploaded the latest one, but if I do, I'll send that around the mailing list anyway, just so you can see a bit more detail how we approach this. I think it is a good approach and worth doing. So that was all I had to contribute today. I'd be interesting actually, if you wouldn't mind, just sharing what you would like to discuss in the future. If we were going to do more forums like this, are there particular aspects that you're interested in? One of the things on my list is evaluating the effectiveness of online CPD, which we've got those surveys that I showed earlier, but we're also looking at how we do long-term impact studies. And the second thing would be how we market online. And I know this might not be applicable to everyone, so that might just be me on my own. But if you have any suggestions as to what issues or things that you'd be interested in, I'd like to spin those up and schedule some more forum discussions in. It's always great to hear what other people are doing and some ideas there.